That's my voice. Hi everyone, my name's Chris. Kurakoto, I hope I pronounced that one right. Google said I did, but I'm not sure, so you can tell me afterwards. Welcome to Silence Isn't Golden. I'm Chris, I'll be your host today. We're going to be talking about some strategies for communicating your ideas as an audio dev. Audio is a very amorphous, hard thing to be able to communicate to a lot of people. Lots of other disciplines get, the luxury of having pretty little visuals, whereas we have to talk in thoughts and feelings and emotions and all that sort of fun stuff. And in addition to that, I'll be just sharing some learnings from my time as part of the Playside audio team. It's a pretty dense topic today, so I'll be moving pretty quickly. Apologies if I just yammer, but I'm open to conversations and questions at any other point if we run out of time for questions. So moving right along. What's a Playside? Playside is Australia's biggest or largest game development company. And we have, it's 350 staff across 3 different offices. When I joined, there's about 65 in one place. So there's lots of people, and that's very rapid development. There's been 70-ish titles since 2011, I believe. And that's been across a whole variety of different places. We have our own very standalone Dumb Ways to Die area, and that's lots of titles. That's been a certain aspect of the company that people have been most familiar with for a long time. But now we also have a lot of other brand new content being developed in these other areas and also in publishing. We also have the largest audio team, for the largest in-house audio team, which is we have 9 audio designers, 3 audio tech and programmers, and 1 audio director, which is a lot of audio people in a small space. And my name's Chris, pronouns are he, him. I've been working here since 2020. I'm a senior audio designer. I've been across a lot of different titles in that time. So there's been about 30 titles, 19 genres, 9 platforms. We've been very, very busy. And then a whole bunch of marketing content as well. And that's been everything from like a mobile MMORPG to an interactive ASMR app to competitive horse riding, countless Dumb Ways games, a multiplayer FPS, there's a survival RTS with a narrative campaign, and then IPs like Legally Blonde, The Godfather, Batman, small indie companies like Meta and Blizzard, stuff like that. And before I did that, I've worked on a bunch of stuff prior, freelancing, and that's been with the BBC, IBM, Google. I did some remixes for Metal Gear Solid 5, and I've been eaten by T-Rex. I voiced a character in Primal Carnage Extinction. And that's a whole new experience when you're like, oh, that's what it would sound like for me to be getting chomped and screaming. It's one for the bucket list. So I wanted to show a little bit of the variety. I put this together the other day, and it's focused entirely on a quick glimpse of the sort of stuff that we, as an audio team, will pivot between. Oh, maybe we go back and hit go on that one from your side, Scott. Perhaps not. Maybe we can come back to that one a little bit later. What do you think? Me? Okay. We've had some minor hiccups that I threw these guys, and they've been very patient with me because we've got to try and do both a crowd interaction sequence and audio and the rest of the presentation. So there's lots of different things. I can try and sort that one out in just a second. So maybe we'll just keep moving, and then I'll send you a link at the end of it. So some key Playside learnings, quick little generalised takeaways at this point. Your new best friends at all times, regardless of what sort of DAWs you're using, processes, or even what area of audio, is naming conventions are a wonderful thing. You can get away without it while you're doing stuff as a solo audio dev for a long time. And then at a certain point, once you have other people trying to populate your cool new ideas, it falls over because something is misspelt or the name of the feature has changed in the 6 months since you last touched it. And then I remember for Age of Darkness, we had maybe 3 different names for the en masse starter enemy unit. And at different points of dev, different things you were touching had different names on it. And that's not what you want. Loudness standards are also your friend, because by the time you get to trying to mix anything that's pretty big, it's a pain in the ass when they're all over the place and you've imported them. And same with documentation, just having an outline as to like, what's happening, why is this happening, what's the vision, this person is sick, they can't explain it, so we need to ship this thing, what are we doing? And as a general thing, the highest impacts to your final audio quality is hard pivots, probably less so to do with your own individual experience and capabilities. It's more that if there's a hard pivot in the design, in the intent, that's going to impact what you can actually do to deliver on that anyway. And then same with your backtracking to meet hard pivots, or like you siloed yourself a little bit too long and then you come back and you're like, oh God, the whole thing's changed, I'm going to wind that one back. And creative misalignment is a similar thing. People have an idea as to what this particular buzzword should and does mean, but your interpretation of that is different versus the next person sitting next to you. And when you're trying to work that one out, it can be painful. This is the main thing for today, that it's always better to communicate your ideas before you get too deep into actually developing your ideas. And this is what we found, is that the best outcomes at PlaySite have continually come from communicating undeveloped ideas rather than developing uncommunicated ideas as the main aspect. And like, this is not an exciting topic, really. It's not why aren't we doing creative deep dives into tool sets or plugins, or here's this secret sauce for like Reaper, whatever it might be. It kind of doesn't matter, because if you have a fantastic idea and you can't communicate it, then it's going to diminish the quality of that idea at the end step anyway. So like whatever you're doing for these secret sauce processes kind of doesn't matter as long as you're able to communicate in time, because if you have a genius move but you communicate it a week before it's supposed to go out the door, probably going to go as like a very mediocre idea anyway. So within that, we're talking about early alignment and communication. When you do that, like our strongest collective suit is creative content. It's creating stuff. That's what we all joined for in the first place. Creative problem solving, creative asset dev, whatever it might be. If you can be across early alignment and communication from the get-go, then you actually reclaim time to spend in your strongest suit anyway, because you're not backtracking. You're not hard pivoting. You're not trying to diminish the quality of something to make it work. And then on top of that, you're also like lowering the actual amount of time and costs and energy from contracting other people that aren't necessarily appropriate, or casting the wrong people, or buying the wrong sample libraries, the wrong Foley materials, whatever it might be. There's a hard time and actual material cost to not talking about this stuff really early on as well. And then beyond that, you actually set up really good co-dev and ongoing feedback loops from the get-go. So this was touched on in the panel earlier today as well, where it's like, don't silo yourself away. It's much less painful to be like, here's my small idea early on, than do it for a long time, come back and be like, it's entirely wrong. I've wasted days, I've wasted weeks. So I hope that we can find a way to make this work. If not, then I'll just act it out. This is a little bit of a left of center way to demonstrate the importance of this concept. Okay, it hasn't actually played by the looks of it. It's playing on this screen. Let's see if this one works. I think it's on the wrong screen, Scott, because I can see it up here. I'll just quickly really explain what this is. So for those who are unfamiliar, I'm going to stand over here. Brain Wall is a Japanese game show which invites participants to stand here with a whole bunch of water up behind them, okay? And you're going to do your best to guess what you think the shape is at the other end. At the other end is a wall, a solid wall. Marge, cheers. Other end of the is a solid wall. Now, this solid wall is going to have a cutout shape in it, and you have a very small amount of time to actually turn around and adjust. So if you've decided, you know what, I think it's going to be a star, then the participant goes, boom, and then the wall is revealed and they go, fuck, it's not a star, it's something else. And you've got to very quickly pull your body into a shape that's going to align with the wall. And if we get any sort of visuals on it, perhaps not, I'll just act it out. So in this scenario, what's happening is when brain wall happens, this is basically game dev. You as an audio designer have siloed yourself beautifully, and you're like, this is the best idea I've ever had. Ta-da, here's my genius move. I'm going to win so many awards. And if you haven't communicated that to the dev team at this point, they're expecting a different shape. at the end. And then that deadline, that wall creeps in closer and closer and closer, and it pushes you in the water. Or it holds up release because you're busy trying to scramble away to turn this beautiful idea into something that is a mangled version of what it actually is. Let's see if we can get something out of it. All right, so it actually hasn't even given you the, this is all sorts of funny business, the starting point. So Scott, can I get you to jump across really quickly to, it's about 4 minutes 10. Yeah, cool. So it's all about get ready, get ready, get ready. Here's my idea. I think it's going to be, oh no. Okay, this is not the one that I wanted. Maybe we can pause this one, because it's not actually, it's definitely not what I wanted. Okay, moving right along. This is day 9 of conferences, and it's a wonderful, wonderful little challenge for me right now. Cool, so the next video, I don't know if you're going to get to play that one as well, is specifically this. This is the whole concept, but let's imagine in this scenario, right, where if you as the participant, imagine these participants are actually they're playing the game wrong. Like they actually have the opportunity at any given point to say, hello people running the game, what's the next shape? What's going to happen over here? But then the participant actively chooses to go, you know what? I think I know, I think I'm good. That's kind of what it's like when you're going to silo yourself as an audio designer, because you're choosing not to engage with anybody else who actually has the outcome that you need to then match the rest of the expectations from the team. And then if your communication's not good, if they say, all right, next thing that's coming along is the letter E, and you're like, cool, audio shape like the letter E. And then you go, wait, uppercase or lowercase? And that's a whole other level of just like setting up that iterative process to be like, you can actually engage with all these processes, get the right answer before it's sprung on you, and have the better outcome anyway. Cool. You know what? I think that one actually started to work. It did not. That's okay. All right, moving right along. So, today's focus recapped. Best audio outcomes at PlaySide have continually come from communicating undeveloped ideas rather than developing uncommunicated ideas. And just kind of recapping what we were saying before, if you think about this notion of like having an amazing idea but poor communication, then you have a higher chance of impacting everything else to do with production at this point. You've got a higher chance of also lowering the quality of the rest of the audio in your game at the end stage. And then you've got a lower chance of actually fully realizing this amazing idea in the first place, because you've got to reshape it into whatever mangled version of your initial outline was there. On the flip side, if you have amazing communication and a poor idea, you have a lower chance of impacting everything else. You've got a lower chance of impacting your overall audio quality. And in a funny way, someone else early on is going to go, that's a bad idea. I don't know about that. Can we resurface that one? And then you're actually inviting other people to be part of this process. And it's much smaller, agile pivots and iterations off the back of that as well. Doesn't mean that like an undeveloped idea means sorry. I really shouldn't have eaten right before I did this. Whew. Doesn't mean that an undeveloped idea is unconsidered, is the main thing. So we need to still have consideration in the things we're actually presenting. Audio tends to get pretty cagey about showing off things that aren't really finished. And we kind of need to change that, because if it's to do with like, don't judge me, it's not finished, it's not polished, it's not ready, because you're worried about perhaps, maybe it's a bit more of a an early learned freelance mindset, because it's about job security in future. But in fact, if you don't deliver on the thing you want, then job security is a bigger risk anyway. So, today's menu is all about planning your ideas, testing your ideas, and presenting your ideas. First part of this is we're going to talk about methods to better inform, explore, and plan your ideas from the get-go. We're going to talk about setting the vision, and we're going to run a one-sheet exercise as well. So first off, first part of this process, you're engaged as an audio professional. It's a new brief, it's a new feature, it's a new project, it's new whatever it might be. But this is the information gathering stage. And this is where you really want to ask questions and ask them early. Just be like over the top with the sort of things you're actually going to be presenting. We got to know what the brief is. You want to know what you're actually personally aiming for, and then how to communicate both these things. And as part of that process, you got this mixture of known versus unknown elements. So like the known stuff can be all about, here's the content that's come from elsewhere, high-level vision doc, new mechanic, new feature, new ideas. This is what we wanted to do. And then this is the uppercase or lowercase version. What's the actual details? And based on this conversation, what can I then present to you as what I think is the most informed version of this idea or the best way forward? And when you do that, you can look to establish and work out what's the overall goal as quickly as possible. So one of the other aspects of audio is that there is an attitude of like, don't engage with audio till much later, which is not what we want. Now, granted, when we're creating content, there is a degree of completion, I suppose, that we do need to adhere to. There's only so many times we can reiterate on, here's an animation sequence timing, or I'm guessing it's going to be this sort of weapon, or this sort of particle effect. But earlier than that, you can still engage with a lot of other stuff. So this is the sort of things you can engage with a team well before you can actually start making detailed stuff. And what this means is early, you could be looking at a vision doc, and that's what we're like, what are we trying to sell? What are we trying to make? What's this new feature? It's a really high level thing. You can talk about media references that are nothing to do with the game, or maybe even games in general. It can be TV, films, board games, whatever. Concept art, once those two things have started to shape up a bit more, super useful when you're playing with how you might do your music outlines. GDD, TDD, game design document or technical design document, what's the sort of features and mechanics we're expecting? And then by that point, you're starting to get to like, right, what's the actual audio references that people might have or that you might have? And then beyond that, things they'll solidify a little bit, and that's where you can have visions or visuals or finalize things to work to. And what can you give back to the team for the sense of alignment? Basically the same thing. So you can give a one sheet, which is a really quick and easy way to summarize, this is the stuff that I want to be able to show, or this is my understanding. You can talk about a tone piece, which is these media references all combined together and going, you know what? You want these abstract things put together, this is what it actually sounds like when they coexist. And a paint over is the same as an overdub, but with this is where you're starting to get into more of the creating territory. This is with content you've already got or information you've already got. Paint over is where you start to actually create, do asset dev, or explore things. And then beyond this, as you get right to the end and beyond, that's where you're having the same thing, but it's just a slight expansion upon that. And these are the three things we're going to touch on today. So what's a one sheet? One sheet is a one pager. It's a really high level summary of core audio pillars. It's a neat little way to be able to quickly and succinctly summarize your intent, demonstrate that you have an understanding of the brief, or maybe highlight any areas that you don't understand, and also to open up feedback or discussion around your current idea. And it's placed within the actual game in its current state. But it's also critical when it comes to getting more people to help you. Or if you're sick and you need someone to jump in, this is really, really handy. If you're selling this idea, here is a brand new audio overview to a stakeholder. This is my understanding. This is the really quick versions of it. What are your thoughts on these buzzwords compared to these buzzwords? And then that's a very quick way to be able to say A versus B with the sort of stuff that you're doing. And it's made of a one-sentence summary, references, buzzwords and themes, and then a bit of an overview down the bottom as well. So this is what we're going to do together. And this is the cause of all the technical drama today, unfortunately. So I'm going to give you two settings, a genre, a platform, and 3 reference titles. And you'll give me 3 buzzwords and 3 themes. And together we're going to get this awesome one-sentence, I'm so sorry, awesome one-sentence summary, and a mostly complete one sheet. So when you're ready, Scott, can we switch over to this? Cool. Right, what I wanted to show today is that like you can have a really abstract combination of stuff. People are going to ask weird shit. That's just how it works. And when you do this, in theory, what we're going to have is a really eclectic mix of stuff, and you're going to try and summarize it into something that still feels cohesive in some variety. Ideally, you shouldn't have to do it in the hard mode that we're going to do, but this is a good example. Cool, so we have sci-fi and comedy. I'm going to chuck those ones in. And we'll have an MMO on Game Boy Color, as you do. Oops, wrong one. And our 3 references, hopefully not all the same. Great, okay. Doom, Life is Strange, World of Warcraft. Hands up who's familiar with at least 2 of these games. There's some pretty big games there, great. Lovely. All right, what I'm going to do here is start plugging these things in. I might start with the references. This is, again, it's just very much an outline and a template, and there is QR code links to be able to download these as well, just in a doc format, so you can use this for future reference. So we had Life is Strange, Doom, and WoW. So what we want to do here is not just be like, oh, so our references for this game are these 3 things for no particular reason. You want to be like, all right, well, if we're looking at the actual content of Life is Strange as a main category, is it the VO? Is it the SFX? Is it the music? Is it like the cinematic sequences? Is it the feels you get? In this one, I'm going to say VO because I love that game and it made me cry a lot. Doom, music. Music of Doom, VO of Life is Strange is a weird mix, but let's do it. And well, let's say the SFX. So we're getting very, very broad in this, but you could go through and be super particular on it. Cool, so we got that. Now what we're going to do is do a quick little duplication of this setting. I might switch back to this if this is okay, Scott? Just so I can type. Thank you. Great. Cool. So we have our setting 1, setting 2, sci-fi and comedy. Let's do this. Now, while I'm typing this up, can I get you guys to have a bit of a think about games you've worked on recently? Doesn't have to be games, it could be anything. Projects being film, TV, games, but think of the most abstract buzzwords that people have thrown at you, or it's like, oh, it's a thematic game that is all about personal development and redemption. Have a bit of a think about it. I'm just going to ask for some stuff thrown at me in a second. What did we say? Sci-fi and comedy. Cool, we're going to put our themes in here. So, who's got a starting theme for me? Great. I love that. 2 more. Any other thoughts? Otherwise, I'll just go with the placeholders we got. Placeholder it is. So we're going romance, wistful romance with the music of Doom. I like it. And maybe 1 more? Sentimental. All right, cool. We've got a very feelsy game for Game Boy Color. Sentimental. Cool. So what we're going to do here is we're talking about these are the ideal pillars. Green is this is the stuff that people have said. This is the best version of what it is. But I also want to make sure that I'm not going too far on these main themes. So I want it to be wistful, but I don't want it to be sappy. Okay? I want it to be romantic, but I don't want it to be, soap operas already here. That's a good one. And I want it to be sentimental, but I don't want it to be, any thoughts? Great. Cliche is beautiful. Cool. So you can see already we've got some pretty strong vibes about this, but that's too far. This, but that's too far. And you can use that to help shape your entire either overview or the palette of the sounds you're going to go for, because these are the descriptors. If you said it needs to be natural but not dull, there's some of your UI sound selections, for instance. It needs to be orchestral but not epic. that's a very different beast to how you might score a game, okay? Same idea for buzzwords. These are more like the descriptors. Any thoughts? Otherwise, I'll just kick off with these ones. No? Cool. Retro. So retro, but not 8-bit. Same idea with this. It needs to have like a vintage sort of feel, but we don't want it to be lo-fi 8-bit. Cool. And let's just do what we got here. So it's going to be fast-paced, but I don't want it to be hyperactive unless somebody wants to jump in for one more. No. Fun. All right, let's do something in relevance to the, let's say the Doom music. So I want it to be heavy, but I don't want it to be brutal, whatever that might mean, depending on your personal denomination of metal taste, okay? So this is what we got so far, and now from here we can complete the rest of our one sentence. So we have wistful, romance, sentimental for our themes. And it doesn't quite work, so let's say it's romance here instead. So sci-fi romance and wistful. I don't think wist is an actual word, but we can say it's wist because we're doing that today. And the last one is sentimental. Cool. Sentimental. All right, let's check our buzzwords in there. We got retro, fast-paced, and heavy. So we have romance meets fast-paced, fast-paced, comedy, whist in the sentimental, heavy. Cool, and then we have the platform and the genre, which I didn't put in, which is an MMO for Game Boy Color. Fantastic. Game Boy Color. MMO. Cool. So we have a retro sci-fi romance which meets fast-paced comedy whist in the sentimental heavy Game Boy Color MMO. That's a whole lot of different nothing words, isn't it? Okay. What you can do off the back of this is then lean further into, say, the references that you've actually got on your audio categories, where you could be like, well, for the Life is Strange VO, you could talk, I mean, there's plenty of stuff about the emotionality of this, so maybe we'll avoid diving too further into that. But let's say WoW SFX, there's an element of adventure, high fantasy, it's kind of stylized magic. So you could say retro sci-fi romance meets fast-paced comedy magic. Why not? In the sentimental heavy Game Boy Color, I don't really think sentimental needs to be here. So let's change that back to the WoW thing to this fantasy, heavy fantasy Game Boy Color MMO. Now this is really cookie cutter stuff. It's not great for everything, it's not going to solve all your problems. However, when we, thank you so much, I'll switch back to the other screen. When we go back to this as some ones that I prepared earlier, this is one we use for World Boss. 90s game show obstacle course with a hint of Hanna-Barbera cartoon tropes, all wrapped up in high-tech containers and delivery systems. Okay? That was kind of the keystone descriptor that we use for our sound design, and even our treatment of our VO announcer. These are a couple I just made up. Gritty, twisted space horror collides with ethereal, enchanting beauty inside a cinematic survival audio experience. It's a screenshot from a game I worked on many years ago called Pamela, which is that. It's like a survival horror dystopian thing. And then lastly, lo-fi hack and slash flight simulator meets Dunway's comedic charm, now with pets, mounts and romanceable NPCs. Now, this is a whole lot of nothing in a lot of different ways, but if you swap things out where instead of it being a high view version of what the audio for this project needs to be, if you then talked about like lo-fi hack and slash flight simulator meets Dunway's comedic charm, and then you remove that and said, but now with the voiceover treatment of Master Chief from Halo, you get a different version of what your VO needs to sound like at that point in time. This is a downloadable template. If anything is useful from that, it's going to come up again a little bit later. But yeah, don't stress about that. Ideally, what you'd also do is this overview, right down the very, very bottom. Using the information you're given from a client, you can then summarize a lot of things about what the feature set might actually look like. If there's not enough information, it's too early in a project, then you can give what you've got so far, because that is plenty to put in front of another client and say, okay, this is my understanding of the game so far. Yes, no. If you're saying it needs to be comedy but not crass, if they turn around and go, I actually kind of like crass, that's really good information to know, because that's going to inform everything before you even start the rest of your processes. Cool, cool? Great. Come on. that one. On to testing our ideas. So we've started with collating all of the information we can get out of this process, and now it's time to actually start playing with some of this stuff. So for part 2, we're going to talk about testing the ideas, which is just methods to be smarter with your time, how to make sure you're not getting too deep in the weeds on something just because it's a cool idea or it's fun, but you've actually got other things to do as a process. And how you can do that in smaller bite-sized chunks, and then how you'll also provide the necessary context when you're actually demonstrating these ideas to people. So before he passed, little personal anecdote, my grandpa was an incredible watercolour artist. I really like these as an example. I asked him to teach me in these last few years as a way to spend quality time together. But before we sat down to make anything, he would always make us do a little colour test on a postcard bit of scrap paper. Now, like, we're working on canvas that is like this big total. So the postcard is about the same size, really. But what it does do is that the point of that particular aspect, that exercise with the actual paint, is these are the colours I've mixed, but when I put it on the paper, and the paper is a slightly different setting, a different context to operate in, my mix is now changed. The way this is presented is now changed. And we want to do the same thing here. So you want to test your ideas in a really small scale, keep it concise, keep it speedy, before you get too deep into developing them. And you want to be testing your cohesion and demonstrate intent more than anything else. So my preferred flow with this is one sheet, so you can be like, here's my understanding, here's the overall vision in buzzwords, in key references, and everything else. And then once you get to the next stage, you want to look into a tone piece, which is then going to demonstrate the cohesion of all these reference points and how you can actually make them coexist in the same space. And then finally you get to a paint over or a functional gameplay implementation slice, if you've got that sort of support or you're that far through dev. And that's to do with showing the intent, but also the ability to execute it in context. I hope this one works. Let's find out. Okay, you know what? I'm going to be very unprofessional. I'm going to run over to you, type in the thing that you need, and then we're going to go. I appreciate this, guys. Otherwise, we're going to be saying all this kind of stuff. So we have lots of layers of security, which is good until you're on stage trying to solve it. Got it? Fantastic. Okay. So just quickly, here's a tone piece. Tone piece is when you are taking all these references from external things, external entities, external stuff, and being like, okay, so this is the stuff that you actually asked for, Mr. or Mrs. Design Lead, whatever it might be, or major stakeholder. This is the weird, eclectic things. This is what it actually looks like when you put it together. Cool. So very, very, very disparate things. But what you're able to do in this sort of scenario is if you provide, let's say you created a tone piece that is specifically for Foley, and you're like, I actually did this once upon a time where it's just like, here's a bunch of different characters walking on different surfaces from different games. And it's like, you know what? I really like the movement of this particular game in this character in this game. I really like the boot sounds in this. This one sounds a bit gritty. This one sounds a bit weird. And as soon as you put this to people who want to be involved in this part of the process, they can be like, I'd like this one off the menu, please. Or you put all of these things together in an overall view of it, and you could say, this is the actual angle we're going for, and in no world should a lot of these games exist in the same sphere or the same characters, but for these very specific use cases, this is the sort of tone that we want to go for. This is the texture we want to go for. This is the Foley palette we want to go for, the descriptors therein. So a tone piece grabs all your targeted references in the one sheet and then smooshes them all together, basically. So a tone piece versus a paint over in this. Tone piece uses non-project visuals, which is testing cohesion of all the things that you think might work, all the things that have been requested as well. And it tests them all against each other to be like, does this work? Does it create something a little bit weird and unusual? Do we like that? And then the other version is a paint over is using project visuals. So this is once you've got to a stage where there's something to work with, or even as concept art, and this is where you're going to test the cohesion of your idea with gameplay elements. Now, a paint over is basically an overdub, but when we're talking to people with a lot of different, very visual focused descriptors or processes, that's a word that gets thrown around a lot more, and overdub has a weird connotation depending on who you talk to. So this is TLDR, I suppose. We shipped a game a little while ago called Age of Darkness Final Stand. Big, epic, survival, RTS thing. People thought that we wouldn't need voiceover in VO. I've played a lot of RTS games. I thoroughly disagreed. And this was an afternoon spent saying, no, really, this is why. This is what we needed to do. So we have a before and an after A-B comparison as a paint over. So what we see here is a bunch of different things, right? You can see the camera moving all over the screen. Beforehand sounds pretty dull. What we do have is we do have some context being set by, come on, thank you, some early music. We actually had Kamil Ormanyanowski. Some people might be familiar with his work around here. He did all the music for this game. He did a damn good job. Apologies to him when we got that capture. The music was balked, but it still sells the idea and the intent. So all you hear at this point in that first version is some early music and a little bit of combat SFX, and that's it. That's all we had in the game at that point. Really, really early. Nothing in this foreground. On the other hand, you have early music and then you have combat ambience, which is group vocalizations. You've got nightmare screaming, you've got humans screaming, wailing on each other, doing all that sort of stuff, and it's spatialized as well. So as the camera moves off screen, you're not really hearing much of the screaming. Come back, you can hear it. And even that's just a fake pan overdub. You got middle ground, which is a little bit of the same stuff, and you got your VO barks, which is the Warcraft 3 like, yes, my lord, when you press a thing and it talks to you, okay? Lastly, down the bottom, which you can't see, is the announcer VO alerts. That's the moments where it's like, you're under attack, what are you going to do about it? And that's the really important stuff. But each of these layers also contextualizes each other, and you wouldn't be able to sell VO without all of those different layers and the actual purpose that it does. So we actually went on to create an entire campaign with dialogue and VO and everything else, which wouldn't really have worked in the same way had there been a no VO policy. And secondarily, it demonstrates this concept of building from the bottom up. I love this GIF, and Bob Ross is pretty right. I think this actually demonstrates a point pretty well. So imagine this canvas is your entire gameplay experience, and this is like end-to-end duration minutes of music. He starts with a bass wash, which is your music, ambience, stuff that has the biggest coverage of the whole gameplay experience, starting with that. You got a middle ground, which is kind of the landscape and the day-to-day repetitions. It could be Foley, like we talked about before. It could be the moment that you pick up something and it makes a sound. It's the stuff that doesn't really pull focus, but it sets context for this stuff down in the corner. Now these are your feel-good moments. This is when you level up. This is when you have an alert that says your buildings are under attack. And for your entire gameplay experience, it's a very small portion of the time. So with that, you have, that is made far more important by scarcity in its own right and by the context of everything else that it's sitting on top of. So this is what we got. You got a background being your world or emotional context, you got day-to-day moments, you got feel-good moments, and then you see Bob doing perspective. So perspective in this scenario is what's the decision about what goes in each layer? And that can be to do with game design pillars. What's the most important things that need to adhere, and what's their placement on this canvas? And then you can also think of it kind of like a food pyramid in a lot of ways. So if you start with the bottom, you start with your temp music, you start with your temp ambience, it's going to contextualize and give more importance or less importance to all the other elements as well. If you do it the wrong way round, it's very hard to work with. So you treat it as the same as the food pyramid. If your level up sounds is the same as, thank you, eating ice cream for every meal, ice cream is only really sweet by contrast because you're eating other stuff in between. It's like, it's the, I did it, I had my vegetables, I can have some ice cream now. If your level up sound is interchangeable with your like panel up sound, it's going to lose its impact very, very quickly. So what you want to do is ideally start from the bottom, start with the biggest point of coverage that's going to provide context for whatever you're actually trying to demonstrate as well. And that's your music, so put more music in than you think you need, more ambience in than you think you need, and have it randomized every time you're working, because very quickly you're going to run out of, or you're going to shrink down that pool, rather. If you've got stuff that's randomly selected each time, then very quickly while you're working on this thing, you're going to go, that one's a bit crap, I'll pull it out of the pool. And if you're getting tired of some music or some ambience or a repetitive sound while you're working on it, you can be damn sure a player is going to pick that up very quickly, and it's going to make them very uncomfortable. So yeah, can't emphasize enough, big picture elements early, and then start with a bigger pool than you need and then randomize it. A good example of what not to do, we had an experience recently where big boss fight, big epic boss fight, and this, especially up the top, was all the important stuff. It needed to really feel strong all the way through, but the final music came through very late. So the entire mix bandwidth was eaten up by those top two parts. So by the time you're trying to put this thing in, right at the end, there's no room. It's a whole refactor for something that should be driving the rest of the vibe of that experience. It's not, wouldn't recommend. It's not a good time. And last bit, we're going to power through because we're almost out of time. It's all to do with the best ways to actually be talking the talk when you're actually talking to devs, talking their language. It's all about explaining your processes. It's all about language and tone to use therein as well. So it's a little video of Bob Ross. I won't go through it because we don't have time. But the guts of it is, look, I'm just really leaning in to have as much Bob Ross as I can. It's a good time. But the reason why he's so well known is not specifically his hair or his talent, like undeniable, both things. However, it's the way he talks to you and invites you to be part of the processes. He explains everything about what he's doing. All right, here's my palette, and I've got this kind of blue, this kind of red, this kind of whatever, and here's my technique. What do you think? What are you going to do on your side? That's fine, explore. And he invites somebody to be part of that process all the way through. So if you can think about how you would present your ideas to stakeholders or creative visionaries on a project,
And you're approaching it as to do with like, well, if Bob Ross can connect with people through a screen decades afterwards from the way he's inviting people to be part of these processes, it's not really dissimilar. And you want people to be comfortable and engaged and excited to work with you and your ideas, basically. So, quick cheat sheet of this. If you're talking to your designers and your artists, you want to talk in feels, you want to discuss imagination, you want to talk ideas that are all about like, how do you evoke something? How do you align on the big picture, indescribable emotions and sensations? If you're talking about your ideas to producers and ops level people, figures. Like, talk about the ideas, they might get excited, but then it's always going to come back to like, what does it cost? Can you fit it into the scope of things? And then the last one, both. And that's because they don't really like to be, pushed into a corner in that sense. So if you're inviting them to be part of the process, explain some of the big picture ideas and the creative intent, but then talk about why it's going to work for value to the product as well. So what you want to achieve in this is like, you are succinctly conveying your intent to this person, and ideally you're doing that with the 3 steps we've already talked about. So it's really small. Here's my intent. What do you think about this? Here's these parts put together. What do you think about this? Here's an A or B. That's it. And it's much smaller incremental cycles of feedback as you do that. And then you're going to invite them to be included. So if there's an A/B of the A or D thing we saw before, then what you're actually doing is also saying, well, look, we've got some VO here, we've got some cool ideas. Have you had any thoughts on who we would cast for this thing if we did it? I've got some thoughts. I reckon this is a great reference. And they go, oh, I hate that character. Then you've solved a casting problem straight away. And then have clear next steps with what needs to be done once you put these ideas forward. A couple more little hot tips. Talk about value. And value is always a really strong part of this. So it's to do with like value to your user experience. If you're trying to sell this dynamic ambient system, be like, well, it's going to engage the player for a longer amount of time. If you're talking about scope, it's like, well, instead of hand-rolling a whole audio system, let's free up some designer, or rather some code capacity and use Wise. Great. Things like this. Or then alternatively, like if you get a composer, there's additional revenue streams from soundtracks. Or doing this means that I have a better time at work. Like, it's a pretty strong one as well. And then lastly, flexibility in mind is flexibility to execute or to scope up and down. It's not like bending over backwards with your ideas. It's just saying, do you have off-ramps in the ways you're going to be able to explain stuff? If you're saying, here's my methods, how can I achieve the same outcome at the very end, even if it's not in the same route that I wanted, or the same like end goal experience to the player? Lastly, make it real simple. Comparison A. Did you like comparison A? Comparison B. Don't put it in like a really convoluted file name or a description. Hello, these are the 2 things you're looking at today. It's nothing to do with the music or the sound effects or whatever. I need a decision on this one versus this one. What do you think? Because you might be really vying for their time, and this might be meeting 6 for the day. You know what I mean? Keep it really concise. Decision A, decision B. Okay, key takeaways. So, it's always better to communicate your ideas before you get too deep into developing your ideas. Use a one sheet to quickly consolidate your learnings and creative intent for a new one, and then you're going to use it to start conversations more than anything else. Then moving along from that, test your ideas in a really small format and get feedback, and then iterate. That's it, and you do a very small iteration each time. And then as you're doing these processes, build it from the bottom up so that you give yourself the best capacity to make smaller changes moving forward as well. Because otherwise, trying to insert music after the fact is really hard, for instance. And then choose your presentation format, tone, and language to suit the recipient. Who are you actually putting this to that's going to control the purse strings or your ability to get on the project? Once more to be sure, best audio outcomes at Playside have continually come from communicating undeveloped ideas rather than developing uncommunicated ideas. That's me. I don't know if we have time to show the show reel on the back of it. What do you think? It'd be cool to show what we actually do. Fantastic. It's right near the start. Thanks, Scott. Can I just be a little unconventional and maybe give a quick hand for the sound guys for dealing with me today? This has been a lot. That's the one.
Ever dreamt of a vacation that's truly out of the ordinary? Hear that one? This could be yours today. No strings attached. We promise, nothing can go wrong. What are you waiting for? Book now! Come enjoy our complete safe, all expenses paid vacation.
There we go.
Thanks very much, everyone.